Why is Australia in Eurovision? They're not even like in Europe at all, is a question many friends might ask during Eurovision viewing parties. This video is for them. The short answer is the organizers invited Australia to participate. Okay, video done. See you again very, very soon. But why Australia and not some other random country on the other side of the planet? Unlike every other participating country in Eurovision, some of which are also not in Europe, Australia is the only one clearly not part of the European Broadcasting Area, which is a prerequisite for membership in the European Broadcasting Union, the EBU, which organizes the Eurovision Song Contest, and thus is also a prerequisite for participating in Eurovision. So the real answer lies with Australian broadcaster SBS, which has been broadcasting Eurovision in Australia since 1983, both live and in a repeat broadcast on Sunday evening because of the huge time difference. SBS is an observing member of the European Broadcasting Union and so at least kind of fulfills that criteria. SBS is mainly a broadcaster for Australia's large immigrant communities and often shows programming like news or movies in foreign languages instead of English. According to the census of 1976, there were huge numbers of people with parents born in European countries, all of which participated in Eurovision at that time already. And if you add to that all the Europeans that immigrated to Australia after the 1970s, you get a huge population already familiar with the Eurovision Song Contest and maybe also with some patriotic feelings for their countries of origin. And in SBS, they had a broadcaster that could meet their needs, and that really worked because SBS achieved some of its highest ratings with Eurovision, a real win-win situation. However, the way to full-fledged participation was gradual. From 2010 to 2014, SBS organized an Australian televote, and even though the results didn't even count towards the final result, people enthusiastically participated. In 2012, Australia got its own commentator booth. Then in 2014, the country was invited to provide one of the interval acts for one of the semi-finals, promptly moved itself to Europe, and surfers and koalas invaded the Eurovision stage. To mark the 60th anniversary of Eurovision in 2015, Australia was finally invited as a one-off wildcard entry, and they didn't even have to qualify from the semi-finals because it was a one-off. In hindsight, that seems a bit unfair, doesn't it? Australian Idol winner Guy Sebastian represented them well and came fifth, while 4.2 million Australians watched the shows, the highest ratings SBS had ever achieved. This success down under explains why Australia wanted to return in 2016 as well and has done so every single year until today. But why would the EBU want to invite Australia back? Well, each participating country has to pay a participation fee. So the more countries that participate, the more money comes in, and thus also the less each individual country has to pay into the pot. So maybe some smaller countries with less of a budget for Eurovision are only there because Australia also pays their participation fee. In 2018, a 5-year contract was signed guaranteeing Australia's participation, and so some people were worried that 2023 might have been their last entry. But of course, now we know that they are thankfully back in 2024 as well. And the Australian music industry will also be very happy to get to promote an Australian artist to 200 million people. By the way, the first time an Australian took part in Eurovision was not in 2015 when they were first invited, but in 1972, when 2 members of the UK entry were actually from down under, as was Olivia Newton-John in 1974, Gina G in 1996, both representing the UK, and Jaden Comerford as part of Texas Lightning, representing Germany in 2006. And even though 3-time winner Johnny Logan is Irish, he was born in Melbourne. And maybe some of these participations also created some buzz in Australia for Eurovision. So Australia's relationship with Eurovision is old and very special and is quite hard to replicate, as until now ill-fated tries to bring Eurovision to the US, Canada, Asia and Latin America have shown. I hope you liked this explanation of why Australia is part of Eurovision. Do subscribe to this channel if you want more explanations around the Eurovision Song Contest and more content around the best music competition in the world. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you for my next video if you want to. Bye bye.